Look at this mess! You jeopardized the entire deal with your carelessness.
My name is Lena Torres, and a year ago I thought I had my dream job. I was 27, working at Nolan Marketing Group, one of the most prestigious firms in Chicago. I was ambitious, creative, and maybe a little naive. I believed that hard work would always be recognized, that talent would always win. But I learned that in the corporate world, the people who smile at you in meetings are often the same ones sharpening knives behind your back. Greg Nolan, my boss, was a man who could make or break your career with a single phone call. He was charming in that fake CEO way, expensive suits, perfect smile, and a talent for taking credit for other people's work. But when he looked at me, I could tell he saw something different. Not a threat, not an equal, just another employee he could use until I burned out. Everything changed the day I presented my idea for the Eclipse campaign. It was a digital marketing strategy designed to merge storytelling with interactive social media engagement, something no other agency had done yet. I stayed up for 3 nights straight perfecting it. I even ran projections that showed the campaign could boost client revenue by 180% in under 6 months. When I pitched it to Greg in the boardroom, I could see the spark in his eyes. He didn't just like it, he needed it. He clapped, smiled, and said, "Brilliant work, Lena. Let's polish it together before showing the board." I thought he meant we. But in corporate language, we often means me doing the work, him taking the glory. A week later, I was called into the main conference room for the big client presentation. I was so excited. I wore my best navy blue suit, had my notes ready, and even brought my presentation file on a USB drive. But when I stepped in, Greg was already at the front, smiling confidently at the executives. And then, my stomach dropped. He was presenting my slides. My entire campaign, my data, my visuals, my words, but not a single mention of my name. I watched in silence as he delivered it flawlessly, earning rounds of applause. The client was thrilled. The board approved a massive budget. And Greg basked in the spotlight like a movie star. When I tried to speak afterward, he just patted my shoulder and said, "Teamwork, Lena, that's what wins." Teamwork. Right. But the worst part wasn't that he stole my work. It was that he made me look like a failure afterward. 2 weeks later, during a performance review, he accused me of lacking initiative and not being aligned with company goals. He said I was too ambitious and too focused on personal recognition. Then he smiled, that cold, rehearsed CEO smile, and told me I was being let go. Just like that, fired in front of my entire department. No warning, no severance, just humiliation. I remember walking out of the office, my box of belongings in my arms, a few framed photos, my favorite mug, a small plant I'd kept by my desk. My coworkers avoided my eyes as I passed. I could hear Greg in the conference room laughing, probably already spinning a story about how I couldn't handle pressure. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment, staring at the city lights. Every instinct in me screamed to give up, to crawl into bed and disappear. But then something inside me shifted. A quiet, focused rage. I realized Greg didn't just take my idea. He proved something to me. He showed me that I had what it took to lead, not as someone's assistant, not as a pawn, but as a visionary. So I made a decision. If Greg Nolan wanted to play dirty, I'd beat him at his own game. The next morning, I began rebuilding from scratch. I opened my laptop, created a new folder, and typed 3 words at the top of the document: Project Eclipse Reborn. I took my stolen campaign and rewrote every element, every strategy, and every timeline, improving it, optimizing it, making it better than ever. I rebranded it under a new name, Solar Rise Media. I had no office, no investors, and no employees. Just my laptop, my ideas, and an anger that fueled every sleepless night. I reached out to a few small clients, local businesses who couldn't afford big agencies but needed modern marketing help. I promised results, and I delivered. Within 2 months, my first client doubled their revenue. Within 4, I had 6 more on board. I started hiring, freelancers at first, then full-time designers and strategists. People who'd left Greg's company for the same reasons I did, burned out, overlooked, underpaid. We became a small family, and word spread fast. By month 7, one of Greg's former clients, a luxury skincare brand, contacted me directly. They said Greg's new campaign wasn't working, that they missed the creativity of that Eclipse concept. I smiled and told them, I know exactly what you're talking about. They signed with me the next week. It was poetic justice, watching Greg's empire slowly crumble while mine rose from its ashes. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. Almost a year after being fired, I received an invitation, Nolan Pierce's annual corporate gala. It was an event I used to dream of attending as part of the team. Now I saw it as an opportunity. I arrived in a tailored black dress, calm, confident, and unrecognizable. My company, Solar Rise Media, had grown enough to make waves in the same industry Greg dominated. And that night, our name was on everyone's lips. I spotted him across the room, Greg Nolan holding a glass of champagne, smiling that same arrogant smile. He looked like a man who thought he was still in control of the world. He didn't know the truth yet, but he would. Because the biggest client he'd just lost, the one that sent his firm into financial panic, had just signed a multi-year contract with me. And that contract wasn't just business. It was the final domino in his downfall. 3 weeks after the gala, the first crack appeared. It was a single email from a beauty client who'd been with Nolan Pierce for 8 years. We're pivoting our budget, effective immediately, we're terminating. It looked routine. A polite goodbye, a legal paragraph, a signature. But in an agency built on momentum and image, one goodbye is never alone. It's a signal, and signals travel. 2 days later, a fintech client reassessed Q4 priorities. Then a streaming app paused spend. Greg's weekly pipeline sheet, once a glossy parade of logos, started looking like a winter tree. I didn't gloat out loud. I didn't post vague quotes about karma. I just kept working. Solar Rise Media was growing faster than I'd planned. We moved out of my apartment and into a sunlit loft with scuffed concrete floors and a row of mismatched plants I pretended I knew how to keep alive. We were a lean team of 9: Priya, Art, Dante, Data, Ezra, Copy, Izzy, Account, and a bench of contractors who called our Slack channel the Hive. We were loud, chaotic, sleep-deprived, and on time. Our clients didn't need handshakes. They needed results. We gave them both. Still, I knew Greg. He would not accept decline. He would bulldoze denial through it. He'd charm. He'd threaten. He'd burn the furniture to heat the house. That's why I built something sturdier than hope. It had started months earlier, quietly, with coffee. 10 minutes, that's all I can do, Meera Patel whispered, sliding into the corner booth of a noisy cafe. She was Nolan Pierce's controller, the one person who knew where the numbers were buried and what they were trying to hide. I'm not asking you to break the law, I said. I'm asking you to remember what it felt like when he told you your pay raise was gratitude enough. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Audit windows, debt covenants. He's leveraged the line of credit to the ceiling. If 2 top clients churn before November, he'll breach. The bank will call. She looked at her watch. You didn't hear it from me. I didn't, I said. I heard everything. Agencies love to flex revenue, but cash is the real pulse. Greg had grown too fast, bought too many impressive chairs, hired too many chiefs with pristine resumes and no calluses on their hands. The burn was a bonfire, and his ego had taken out the mortgage. So I did something I'd never done in my life. I called a private equity firm. Northbridge Holdings, the partner answered, voice like marble. We prefer quiet situations. Perfect, I said. I prefer quiet victories. We didn't talk about vengeance. We talked about ratios, covenants, distressed assets. The plan was unemotional, which is how you protect your heart while you pull the wire. Northbridge bought a participation in Nolan Pierce's revolving line, a small piece that came with a large lens. We could see the pulses Meera had described, the late receivables, the quarterly lies dressed up as optimism. The bank didn't want to fight. It wanted stability. I wanted leverage. While the numbers creaked, I focused on my art. Priya and I rewired the Eclipse concept into something fluid, modular storytelling units that moved across platforms like dancers changing partners, UGC sparks, creator collabs, shoppable micro moments, hourly pacing that learned and adjusted as it ran. Dante's dashboards felt like cheating. They could see a campaign underperforming before the client even knew what underperforming meant. Word spread in strange ways. A CMO's assistant who loved our memes, a founder who met me by accident at a yoga studio, a producer who was tired of meetings that didn't end with decisions. The pipeline filled in pencil, then pen, then calendar blocks that glued our days together, and then the inevitable happened. Greg called. "Lena!" he sang like we were old friends playing hooky. "How's that freelancing?" I could hear the ice clink in his glass. "We're not freelancers, Greg. We're an agency." "So cute," he said. "Listen, darling, I have a proposition. 2, actually. 1, why don't you come back? Water under the bridge. We'll give you a fancy title, Chief Innovation Officer. You'll get your name in the press. I'll shield you from the stressful parts. And 2, sell me your book. Hand over those fussy little DTC clients and I'll pay you a premium. We'll tuck you under our umbrella. You get stability. You're not built to run payroll forever, Lena. It ages you." I smiled at the window. The city looked like a motherboard. "Greg," I said, "you fired me for being too ambitious. Then you stole my work. Then you told people I cried in the bathroom." He chuckled. "You did cry in the bathroom. I also built a company in a year," I said. "And one more thing, Greg. I like payroll. It keeps me honest." He didn't like that. His voice sharpened. "You're out of your depth," he said. "This industry eats girls like you." "And men like you get indigestion," I said and hung up. 2 days later, he tried flattery on Dante, then money on Priya, then leverage on Ezra. We didn't respond. Not because we were scared, because we were busy. Still, the ping started. LinkedIn messages from his strategist, emails from his PM, anonymous DMs from a junior art director. They weren't poaching. They weren't even asking about jobs, not at first. They were just checking in, testing the air in our world. Was it real? Was it safe? Did we mean what we said about crediting the people who did the work? "We have rules," I told Izzy. "We don't steal. We don't solicit. But we do answer when someone asks, is there another way?" There was. Meanwhile, the bank's patience wore thin. Missed covenants trigger meetings, and meetings trigger paperwork, and paperwork triggers the one thing CEOs dread: scrutiny. The board demanded an emergency session. I wasn't in the room, but I've heard the theater described enough times to see it like film: a mahogany table, a wall of framed awards. Greg in his sharpest suit, explaining how macro headwinds and client uncertainty were to blame, while Mira quietly clicked through slides that didn't care about adjectives: cash, receivables, burn, red, red, red. "Temporary," Greg said, sweating inside a cologne ad. "We've got a pipeline, You've got 30 days, the chairwoman said. "Fix it or we fix it for you." "Which means?" he asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. On day 12, I triggered the next domino. Northbridge, polite, efficient, bored by drama, notified the bank of a cooperation clause and requested a stability plan. The words were bloodless. Their meaning wasn't. If a buyer appeared with cash and a credible operating plan, the bank would welcome a transition. Welcome is corporate for help push. I didn't want Nolan Pierce. I wanted the parts that worked, the bones under the bravado, the mid-market accounts that trusted talent, the data warehouse Mira had begged for and never got, the production studio hidden in a basement like a secret shame. I wanted the people who thought they were invisible. So I made 2 lists: keep and let go. It felt surgical. It also felt like mercy. "Are we really doing this?" Priya asked, eyes wide, fingers inked with marker from storyboarding the next quarter. "We're going to try," I said. "If the math lies, we walk." The math didn't lie. I met Greg a week later in a private room at a steakhouse where ambition went to drink. He arrived late, grinning like a politician who didn't know the vote had already happened. "Lena," he said, sitting without asking, "you look prosperous." "You look tired," I said. He laughed too loudly. "The bank's being dramatic. We'll get through." "But this cooperation thing, do you know anything about that? Some fund called North something?" "Northbridge," I said. "Right. Anyway, they're getting in the way." "They're organizing the way," I said. "It's different." "Don't be cute," he snapped. "I built this place." "And mortgaged it," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "Term sheets, employee protections, client transition frameworks. A clean, non-explosive bridge from his cliff to my shore." He flipped through the pages, not reading, just performing the act of reading like a man who'd learned success as choreography. "What is this?" he asked. "An asset purchase," I said. "We take on the clients we want, the staff we choose, the obligations we actually intend to meet. You settle the rest with your lender. You walk away with dignity." He blinked. "Dignity?" "It's worth more than equity after bankruptcy," I said. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Not humility, never that, but calculation stripped of cosmetics. "Why you?" he asked, softer now. "Why do you get to win?" "I didn't say I get to," I said. "I said I'm prepared to." He leaned back. "You did all this since I fired you?" "Yes." "And you expect me to work for you?" "I expect you to choose your ending," I said. "You can fight and drown, or you can sign and swim." Silence dripped from the ceiling. He closed the folder and smoothed his tie. "Counter offer," he said. "You buy the whole company. Keep the name. Keep me as CEO for optics." I shook my head. "I'm not buying your mirrors." He smiled without humor. "Then I'll find another buyer." "You had a year," I said. "They all met me." The waiter set down 2 plates no one would eat. The room felt cold. Greg stood. "You always were ungrateful. You always were predictable," I said. He didn't slam the door. Men like Greg don't slam. They draft angry emails at midnight and copy their lawyers. The next morning, 3 things happened. First, the bank called. Not me, Northbridge. The patience quota had been exhausted. Proceed. Second, Mira resigned. Her letter was 3 sentences long and ended with, "I will be cooperating fully with the transition team." She texted me a smiley face that somehow looked like a sunrise. Third, my receptionist buzzed me with a voice I hadn't heard in a year. "Lena, he's here." "Who?" "He says you know him." She lowered her voice. "Greg." I found him in our lobby, under the plants, beside a wall of client case studies printed on foam core. He looked smaller without the trappings of power. Same suit, less gravity. "Don't say anything," he said, hands up. "Just hear me." "I have a meeting in 6 minutes," I said. "This is the part," he said, voice shaking, "where you try to humiliate me." I met his eyes. For a heartbeat, I saw the man who had once clapped when I pitched Eclipse, the one who could have chosen to build instead of devour. "No," I said. "That would be your style." He swallowed. "Then what is this?" "This," I said, "is me making sure the people you forgot get paid, that the clients you overpromised get served, and that the story ends without collateral damage." He looked past me, into the office where Priya was laughing, Dante was arguing with a dashboard, and Ezra was narrating a mock commercial for our espresso machine. It probably sounded like home to someone who'd never had one. "Do I have a place in it?" he asked. I checked the clock. 5 minutes. "You have a choice," I said. "Sign the transition, help make it clean. I'll offer you a 6-month advisory contract. No title, no spotlight, just work. Or walk away and watch me do it without you." He stared at the floor like it had an answer written on it. "Why are you offering me anything?" he whispered. "Because I promised myself I'd be the kind of leader I needed when you were mine," I said. "And because vengeance isn't efficient, closure is." The door clicked behind us. My team went quiet, sensing the shape of the moment. Greg lifted his eyes. For the first time since I'd known him, there was no performance left. "Bring the papers," he said. The papers were signed by noon. Greg's hand trembled slightly as he scrawled his name across the final page. Every stroke seemed heavier than the last, not just ink, but resignation, ego, and every lie he'd built his empire on. When the final document slid into the folder, he exhaled the way a man might after realizing the race was over, and he'd lost without even hearing the finish gun. He didn't look at me when he stood. He just said quietly, "You win." I didn't smile. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about balance, restoring what he'd broken. When the door closed behind him, the room felt weightless. My team, who had watched from the hallway in cautious silence, erupted into nervous laughter. Dante raised a coffee mug like a toast. "Did that just happen?" Priya grinned. "Did we just acquire Nolan Pierce?" "Not exactly," I said, holding up the signed agreement. "We just bought its future." Over the next few weeks, chaos turned into structure. The transition wasn't pretty. Old accounts in shambles, disillusioned employees wondering if they'd have jobs, vendors demanding payments Greg had promised but never sent. I spent every morning in back-to-back meetings, every evening reviewing spreadsheets that looked like battle maps. But through the exhaustion, there was a strange peace. Every broken promise I fixed, every overdue bill I paid, every underpaid designer I promoted, but it felt like justice in motion. One afternoon, Mira walked into my new office, a glass-walled corner space overlooking the same skyline I used to stare at from my tiny apartment. "You know," she said, setting down a stack of reconciled ledgers, "in 15 years of accounting, I've never seen a takeover this clean. Usually there's blood everywhere." "Maybe that's the point," I said. "You don't have to burn it down to rebuild it." She smiled. "That's why people follow you, Lena. You remember the humans in the spreadsheets." Her words stayed with me longer than I expected. 3 months after the acquisition, Solar Rise Media officially absorbed what remained of Nolan Pierce. The headlines read, "Young entrepreneur rescues legacy firm from collapse. They called me the Phoenix of Marketing." I laughed when I read that. They didn't know the ashes they were talking about used to be mine. At the celebratory launch event, I stood on a minimalist stage beneath a new sign. Solar Rise, a Nolan Pierce partnership. That last part was intentional. I had offered Greg a silent role, not as punishment, but as a reminder. He didn't deserve erasure, he deserved accountability. Every month, he'd receive updates showing how the same company he once ran into the ground now flourished without his greed. I saw him once during that period. He came by the office under the pretext of dropping off legal documents. He looked thinner, quieter. He stopped at the lobby where his old nameplate, Nolan Pierce Marketing Group, had been replaced by our new logo. When he saw me, he hesitated. Then he nodded. "I read the press," he said. "You're making something good." "I'm making something fair," I replied. He smirked faintly, the edge gone from his voice. "You were right. Ambition isn't the problem. Fear is." I didn't answer. He didn't expect me to. We understood each other in a way that didn't require words, the kind of understanding that only comes after a war. He left quietly, and I never saw him again. Months rolled into a year. Solar Rise expanded across 3 cities. Our campaigns won awards not because they were flashy, but because they worked. Our culture became a talking point. Open salaries, shared credit, transparent goals. We did what Greg always claimed was impossible. We built success without exploitation. But even in victory, I stayed grounded. Some nights I'd walk the office alone, lights dimmed, city glittering below, and remember the girl carrying her cardboard box through the rain. The girl who'd once believed talent was enough. That version of me didn't die. She just evolved. Then one morning, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a resignation letter. It was from Greg. He'd left his advisory role early, citing health and personal reflection. At the bottom, he'd handwritten a note. "Ambition isn't a flaw, it's a fire. You learn to build with it. I burned myself. Thank you for showing me the difference. GN." I read it twice, then placed it in a drawer, not out of sentiment, but closure. The kind of closure that doesn't need applause. A week later, we hosted our annual leadership summit, a tradition I'd started to celebrate the people who built Solar Rise. During my closing speech, I looked around the room at the faces that had stayed, fought, and believed. "I used to think revenge meant watching someone fall," I said. "But real revenge? It's standing taller, not to make others feel small, but to remind yourself that you were always capable of more." Applause filled the space, but what I felt most was calm, because this wasn't just a victory speech. It was a full circle.